As the president of Reasons to Believe, our focus is to show people how God reveals himself through two books. He reveals himself faithfully through the book of nature and the book of Scripture. And what it shows us in Psalms and Job is that the more we learn about nature, the more evidence we see for the supernatural handiwork of God. And the record of nature is literally exploding in the 21st century. In the book of Daniel, it says, at the time of the end, knowledge will explode. And we're living in that time. So what I want to share with you this morning are discoveries made just in the past few weeks and few months that make a stronger case for the existence and operation of the God of the Bible. Now, how many have ever played a game of darts? Okay, it's very popular in Canada where I'm from. But I want to talk to you about the ultimate darts champion, namely that our Creator has been throwing darts at our planet. Literally, he's been throwing asteroids at planet Earth of just the right size, just the right composition, at just the right time, and just the right location. I'm going to speak about three of the most recent giant asteroid collisions, and how if it wasn't for those three being exactly the way they are, it would not be possible to have global human civilization. We're here because of these three asteroid collisions, and they were just discovered in the past little while. Now, one of the problems that we face, let me skip over this. Here we go. That the sun gets brighter and brighter as it continues to fuse hydrogen to helium. For 90% of Earth's history, Earth has had no ice at all. And yet today, we've got ice when the sun is brighter than it's ever been before. And so what I want to talk about is the paradox of how we got ice in spite of the sun being so exceptionally warm. You say, well, couldn't God have put us here earlier? Only when the sun is perfectly middle-aged is the sun stable enough in its luminosity to permit global human civilization. So it has to be that bright. But we need ice to sustain our civilization. For example, without the melting of ice left over from the last ice age, we wouldn't have the water to irrigate our great agricultural plains. And if it wasn't for the ice age cycle, we wouldn't have the fertilization events that dump nutrient-rich material onto the great agricultural plains. That's just two of more than a dozen different benefits we get from having ice on planet Earth and an ice age cycle. But if you were to go back 3 million years, we'd have a planet with no ice. What I'm going to talk about is an asteroid collision that began the buildup of ice on planet Earth. And this asteroid was between 1 and 2 miles in diameter. Typically, when an asteroid of that size hits the Earth, that's utterly catastrophic. But this one happened to hit in the South Pacific Ocean, off the south tip of South America, and it hit in a place where the water was 17,000 feet deep. So it caused a big splash. Matter of fact, it caused a splash that generated 1,000-foot-high tidal waves, tsunamis, throughout the entire Pacific Ocean, even throughout the Atlantic, even throughout the Mediterranean Sea. In fact, up by Trieste in the Adriatic Sea, they found evidence of a huge mud deposit that was generated by a 1,000-foot-high tidal wave from this collision event. And this particular asteroid wasn't discovered until recently because it didn't leave a crater. Going through 17,000 feet of water, there wouldn't be a crater. However, when they surveyed the ocean floor, they found meteoritic debris over 500 square kilometers, which allowed them to discover that this thing had to be at least 1.5 miles in diameter as it came into the Earth. And it not only caused a gigantic splash, it hit the bottom of the seafloor with such force, it threw up all that seafloor material, plus all those salt aerosols in the ocean, up into the atmosphere and created a dense cloud that covered the planet for several years and wound up cooling the whole planet. And this is what caused the formation of the Arctic ice cap. Now, when you got ice over the Arctic Ocean, that reflects sunlight with 60% efficiency. When you don't have ice, that liquid water reflects with only 6% efficiency. So it's this high reflectivity that an impact of cooling not only the Arctic, but the entire planet. And set in motion the possibility of actually generating ice on other parts of the planet. And this event has now been dated. It hit 2.58 million years ago. It not only allowed the formation of the Arctic ice cap, it set in motion the ice age cycle. So for the last 2.58 million years, we've been cycling between 20% of the planet being covered with ice, and like what we have today in interglacial, where only 10% is covered with ice. However, this asteroid collision by itself began the buildup of ice over the Arctic, started the ice age cycle, but by itself it wasn't enough to sustain enough ice that we get a global high technology civilization. Coincident with this asteroid collision was 5 simultaneous, unprecedented tectonic events, all happening at the same time. Take away any one of them, we wouldn't have the ice age cycle we have today that's crucial for allowing billions of us to exist here on planet Earth. I'm going to quickly go through these 5. If you want to see it described in more detail at a lay-level language, you can get the book Improbable Planet. But let me just jump through this. If we go back a few million years, we have Antarctica attached to the south tip of South America. Then it broke off from South America and began to tectonically race down towards the South Pole. Split off, raced towards the South Pole, and when it got to the South Pole, it stopped dead on top of the South Pole. This is where it is today. So that again is a remarkable event. We have this rapid motion towards the South Pole. As soon as it gets dead over the South Pole, it stops moving. And Antarctica today ranks as the most isolated continent on planet Earth. Notice there's no land mass near it. And that allows for powerful circulation of ocean current to go around Antarctica. And also generates powerful winds. We call them the roaring 40s and the roaring 50s. And it's that powerful wind and ocean current, in addition to its location over the South Pole, that actually allowed ice to form over Antarctica. And so today, all of Antarctica is covered with thousands of feet of ice, and ice reflects sunlight with 60% efficiency. So this had an effect on cooling the whole planet. And because of that ocean current going around Antarctica, it sent cold water moving up through the entire Atlantic Ocean, thereby cooling all the land masses adjoining the Atlantic Ocean. That's tectonic miracle number 1. Number 2 is what happened to Greenland. Again, go back a few million years, Greenland is situated just off of Newfoundland. But then it began to tectonically move towards the North Pole, moved at a rapid rate, and then stopped dead over a hot plume. You say, what's a hot plume? That's where you get deep mantle material from the interior of the Earth rushing up towards the surface and buckling the surface. And so we got Greenland moving rapidly from Newfoundland, reaches its current location, stops moving, but it's right over this hot plume, which caused the Greenland landmass, which had an average elevation of 500 feet above sea level, to be pushed up to an average elevation of 8,000 feet above sea level. And that high elevation, you're probably aware, every 1,000 feet you go up, the temperature drops by 3.5 degrees. And so that 8,000 foot rise caused a cooling over the whole Greenland landmass and allowed an ice cap to form all over Greenland. And again, ice reflects sunlight with 60% efficiency. Now, the asteroid collision, I mentioned, allowed the formation of the polar ice cap, but it was only because of what happened with the breakup of Pangaea. Every 500 million years, we go through a supercontinent cycle. The continents come together, make one continent, break apart, come together, break apart. We can actually trace 6 of those cycles. The most recent one is Pangaea breaking up, but for the first time, we have most of the continental land masses going up towards the north. And what you see in this particular image here is that it encloses the Arctic Sea. here is a blow-up here where you can see that we got islands, Canada, Greenland, Siberia, Alaska, all working in such a way as to enclose the Arctic Sea with land, and land is always colder in winter than open ocean water. The combination of that continental and island formation combined with that asteroid hitting in the South Pacific Ocean caused the Arctic ice cap to form. Now, if we go back 5 million years, this is what North and South America looked like, where they were separated. And what happened is you had warm Pacific Ocean water moving between North and South America and warming up the cold water coming up from Antarctica. And so this prevented the cooling of the northern land masses adjoining the Atlantic Ocean. But what happened 2.5 million years ago, the Isthmus of Panama forms, and it stops the flow of warm Pacific Ocean water into the Atlantic, meaning that that cold water coming up from Antarctica has its full cooling effect on the land masses adjoining the Atlantic Ocean. The fifth of these tectonic events, and again, these are all happening simultaneously, is what happened to the Indian subcontinent. It was adjoined to the island of Madagascar, broke off from Madagascar, and then sped up towards Asia. And it sped at the remarkable velocity of 22 centimeters per year. That doesn't sound very fast, but keep in mind, we geophysicists consider a rapid tectonic plate movement to be 2 centimeters a year. This is 11 times faster than that. And so we got India moving north, and as it approaches Asia, it's coming at such a high velocity, it crumples up the sea floor between Asia and India, and those are the Himalayas. And then it also pushed up the Tibetan Plateau behind it. And this, by the way, collision is still going on, no longer moving at 22 centimeters per year, but it's moving at 5 centimeters per year. So the Himalayas get taller and taller with every year that goes by. The Tibetan Plateau behind it rises up higher and higher. It explains why, in the Ice Age cycle, every next ice age is more severe than the previous one. We are living just after the most severe ice age in the Ice Age cycle. Why? Because the Tibetan Plateau now has an average elevation of 17,000 feet above sea level. And even though it's close to the equator, that's high enough up that snow and ice will accumulate. The third largest store of ice on planet Earth today is over the Tibetan Plateau in the Himalayas. There's more ice there than there is in the Arctic ice cap. Now, because it's situated so close to the equator, that ice reflects sunlight 4 times more efficiently than the ice over Antarctica or the Arctic Ocean or over Greenland. And so what happened to India actually has the greatest cooling effect of the 5 tectonic events. But once again, take away any one of those 5, or take away that asteroid collision, we wouldn't have adequate ice or the Ice Age cycle that would enable our civilization to be possible today. The second big asteroid God threw at Earth hit the Earth 800,000 years ago. Now, this caused a lot of doubt in the scientific community because they're saying, how could a big asteroid hitting only 800,000 years ago escape our attention? Where's the crater? Well, it's because of where it hit. Just like the one that hit in the South Pacific Ocean didn't leave an easily detectable crater, this didn't either. It hit in the South China Sea, where the Spratly Islands are today. But 800,000 years ago, there was a big island in the South China Sea. This asteroid, more than a mile in diameter, hit that island and basically obliterated it, leaving only little tiny specks of islands that are there today. But this collision 800,000 years ago caused this island to be obliterated, and a lot of that island material got thrown up into interplanetary space as a dust cloud. Every 100,000 years, we pass through that dust cloud. That, combined with 17 other factors, explains why the Ice Age cycle changed 800,000 years ago. From having a 41,000-year cycle, where today it has a 100,000-year cycle. Now, the reason why that's important, if you got a 41,000-year ice age cycle, that means the warm interglacials only last 2,000 or 3,000 years. That's not enough time to develop civilization and technology where billions of us can live on the planet at one time. As a transition to a 100,000-year cycle, that now means you can have warm interglacials that are 10 to 12,000 years wide. That is enough time for us humans to develop the civilization and build up a population of several billion. Now, what I'm going to show you next is the temperature, global mean temperature, for the last 4 ice ages in the ice age cycle. And what you notice here is that you get about 90,000 years of ice covering 20 to 23% of the planet, and then the temperature rises up very quickly, hits a peak that's about 2 degrees centigrade above where we are right now, and then immediately drops you back down into an ice age. That is typical of the ice age cycle, except for the one we're in right now. We're in the only one where the temperature didn't spike up to 2 degrees centigrade above where we are now and then drop down. We now have an understanding why it gets such a rapid drop after it hits that peak. Because when the temperature jumps up to 2 degrees centigrade above where it is right now, that's warm enough to melt the polar ice cap. And when you melt the polar ice cap, you've got all that open ocean water absorbing sunlight with 94% efficiency. And all that extra sunlight and heat being absorbed by the Arctic Ocean makes snow that falls over Canada and Siberia. The only reason why Canada and Siberia are not covered with thousands of feet of ice today, they're virtual deserts. They only get 10 inches of precipitation. Not enough for the ice to accumulate. But jump that up to 20 inches or 30 inches, and very quickly you got thousands of feet of ice covering Canada and Siberia. And during the last ice age, that ice sheet went all the way down into Southern California. Yosemite Valley was created by the melting of ice left over from the last ice age, for example. Now, if you look carefully at this, well, let me show you this. This actually shows you what the global mean temperature was like during the last ice age. In other words, with an ice age cycle, we have extreme climate instability. We don't have climate stability. Throughout the entire ice age cycle, except for the last 9,500 years, it's been characterized by the temperature jumping up and down by 15 degrees centigrade on time scales of just 2 or 3 centuries. It explains why humans during the last ice age could not build up a big population, could not develop global civilization. 3 discoveries that were made, 2 of which are described in Improbable Planet. The other one is up on our website under my blog, Today's New Reason to Believe, that shows that humans living as far back as 35,000 years ago were engaged in sophisticated agricultural activity, where they were planting farms and raising grains and then harvesting those grains, roasting the grains, grinding the grains, and making bakery products. But it was all done on a very small scale because of the climate instability. People couldn't scale up their agricultural activity. They would plant maybe 2 acres and they would put maybe 12 different grain crops on it, expecting 10 of them to fail and 2 of them would produce, and they would feed their families on that too. Same thing with animal husbandry. Instead of specializing on cows or goats or sheep, they would have a few of each of these different kinds of animals because they know that all of them wouldn't survive the climate instability. Not until the climate became stable do we see humans scaling up their agricultural activity, specializing, and then trading, building villages, and the population beginning to rapidly multiply. To put this in context, during the last ice age, 99% of the human population was full-time engaged in trying to provide enough food so that they could survive. Today in the United States, that figure is only 1%. What do the other 99% of us do? Music, art, engineering, science. We code computers, and that explains why we have such amazing technological advance. Only 1% of us have to worry about where we think the food comes from. This is what's unique. In the entire Ice Age cycle, there's only been one episode of climate stability. And this is actually exaggerated. The climate is far more stable. This chart I'm showing you here is 2 years out of date. This is the latest one. And basically that pink there shows you the climate instability. Then you got the blue line of the last 9,500 years. An extremely stable climate where the global mean temperature doesn't vary by more than plus or minus 0.65 degrees. And this is what enabled us to develop global civilization and get billions of us here on once. Now, what you notice on that pink part there, you can see where the temperature dropped down by about 15 degrees, stayed that way for 1,200 years, then spiked back up. That's called the Younger Dryas cooling event. And it was that Younger Dryas cooling event that prevented the temperature from going up to 2 degrees centigrade above where we are now. It prevented the melting of the polar ice cap, set in motion stability. And what's cooling the planet right now is the fact that our rotation axis tilt is going down towards 22 degrees. That always cools the planet. And the shape of our orbit, it's going from elliptical to less elliptical, that also cools the planet. Now, normally, that would have caused a dramatic cooling of the global mean temperature. But what happened was a brief period of climate stability enabled humans for the first time to begin domesticating cows and specializing in beef and cows and milk. They domesticated rice. Those are activities that pump greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. And so as the orbital cycles of the planet were cooling the planet, new human activity was warming the planet, and the two have been in perfect balance for the past 9,500 years, giving this extreme. So for example, we began to engage in lumbering. That also had a warming impact. All the human activity over the past 9,500 years warmed the planet at exactly the same degree that the natural cycles were cooling the planet. And this explains why billions of us can exist on planet Earth today with the technology that we can take the good news of salvation through Jesus Christ to all the people groups of the world in a short window of time rather than a long window of time. But for 20 years, scientists have been puzzled. What could have possibly caused this Younger Dryas cooling event? And one group of scientists said, well, the only explanation, there would have to be an asteroid hitting the planet like what happened 2.58 million years ago, what happened 800,000 years ago. But this got huge pushback in the scientific community. They said, are you aware we're talking about an event only 12,000 years ago? And with that kind of cooling, the crater would have to be at least 30 kilometers across. There's no way that could be hidden. A crater that big and that recent, we'd have to be able to find it. And the fact that nobody had found it caused people to doubt it. They're saying, well, we have no idea what caused this cooling. Then we have NASA sending an aircraft over the northern Greenland ice mass. And they sent it over with their deep ice-penetrating radar turned on. And by accident, they found a gigantic crater 3,000 feet below the ice of Greenland. This just got published a few months ago. And this is the location of the crater. In northwest Greenland, here's a blow-up showing the crater size, 32 kilometers across in size. And this shows you where it hits relative to the Hiawatha ice field. And so the radar found the crater, and then geophysicists went to the site, and they were able to collect meltwater coming out from underneath the ice, and it had the isotope signatures of a gigantic stainless steel asteroid hitting 12,800 years ago. And what that asteroid did, again, 1.5 to 2 miles in diameter, had not only sent a huge amounts of ice into the atmosphere, had a cooling effect on the planet, but it also caused a rain of Greenland rocks to fall all over northern North America. And at that time, there was a gigantic lake of glacial meltwater from the receding of the ice left over from the last ice age, Lake Agassiz. and that meltwater flowed down into the Gulf of Mexico. But this asteroid collision pelted that Lake Agassiz area so intensely that rocks came and blocked the flow of water going down into the Gulf of Mexico and opened up two new channels where we got this very cold glacial meltwater flowing through the Great Lakes out through the St. Lawrence, and also another stream of cold glacial meltwater going up the Mackenzie River and dropping into the Beaufort Sea. And at that time in the Beaufort Sea, there was a powerful ocean current that pushed that cold glacial meltwater from the Beaufort Sea around the Yukon Territory area, out past the Canadian archipelago, down between Baffin Island and Greenland, and basically met the cold water coming out of the St. Lawrence. And what that did is it turned back the Gulf Stream, that warm current that operates in the Atlantic Ocean, therefore cooling all the land masses in the northern part of North America. And for 1,200 years, the entire planet was made about 15 degrees centigrade colder than it otherwise would be. That stopped the melting of the polar ice cap. That's what enabled us to have this climate stability. So again, what I'm sharing with you, here are 3 asteroids of the just right composition, just right collision time, just right size and mass, hitting in the just right location, so we can have this extraordinary period of extreme climate stability. And without that period of extreme climate stability, it simply wouldn't be possible for billions of us to exist here at one time, with the economy and the technology that all of us could hear and understand the gospel message of salvation through Jesus Christ. Because if you look at the biblical creation text, there are about 20 plus major biblical creation texts in the Bible. No other holy book has that much creation content, nowhere close. But every one of those texts links the doctrine of creation with the doctrine of redemption. And there's many Bible passages that tell us God begins his works of redemption before he creates anything at all. I'll give you one example, 2 Timothy 1:9. The grace of God that we now experience was put into effect before the beginning of time. God actually began his works of redemption before he created anything, which implies that everything that God creates is for the purpose of delivering billions of human beings from their sin and evil through the work of Jesus Christ on the cross 2,000 years ago. And that's what's driving our writing strategy at Reasons to Believe, basically making the point that every component of the universe, Earth and Earth's life, and every historical event in the universe, Earth and Earth's life, plays a role in making possible the redemption of billions of human beings. Because God's got a big new creation, and he wants it filled with humans that are in a relationship with him that can never be used for evil's intent for the rest of eternity. You can read about this in Improbable Planet. Again, you can get a free chapter at reasons.org/Ross. I got an entire book coming out on climate change in the late March or early April. It's called Weathering Climate Change. And what I share with you today is just part of one chapter in the book about all the amazing events that God has fine-tuned to make possible our redemption. With that, I'm going to invite the pastors to come out here and join me. We're going to have a time of Q&A, and literally we'll take any question on any topic. And if you want to stick around for the 11 o'clock hour, we're going to have a really long, extended time of Q&A. And again, if you don't get your question answered, feel free to engage me or other scholars through our Facebook and Twitter pages. Thank you.